Unlocking potential, harnessing AI for public and private growth. In the ever-evolving landscape of modern governance and business, one tool stands out as a game changer: artificial intelligence. Yep, folks, that's what ChatGPT just told me when I asked it to give me a pitch for the use of AI in the public and private sectors. And that's what we're going to dig into today with two of my new best friends, my new BFFs, two special guests from KPMG. And you are going to want to join me and Bobby Gorantla and Arthur Higbee. They are two AI whiz kids, I call them, because everybody's a kid to me nowadays. But listen, join us. Find out why we don't need to be afraid of AI and what we're doing with it right now and what's coming down the pike.
People talk about the uncanny valley. There's sort of a, when you start to simulate people too good, it gets a little creepy. And I think that's kind of the stage that we're at, is a lot of people recognize when they try it the first time at home or download one of the models, it feels a little too human-like.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.
Welcome back to A Deeper Dive with me, Dara Cam. Today we are going to talk about the thing that is revolutionizing the computer world and workplaces as well. We are here with KPMG. I called them whiz kids. They kind of laughed at that. We're with, we're not in the Terracotta Room, but we are at KPMG HQ in downtown Tallahassee. I've got a really nice view here of downtown Tallahassee. And I am joined here by Bobby Gorantla, Bobby, help me out. You can see me flailing.
I am managing director. I focus on data and AI for state and local agencies across the country, but specifically also in the state of Florida.
Okay, thank you for that. And Arthur Higbee, who is also a managing director.
Also a managing director, focused on digital transformation for government.
Okay, and that is great. And I mean, these guys are really fun, so don't be afraid that we're going to be talking about AI, because it's everywhere. I was telling the guys that I was fooling around with OpenAI ChatGPT yesterday, and I was really amazed at some of what I was getting back. I was asking it to give me pitches on the actual stories that I had written earlier in the day, and it is just sort of shockingly, frighteningly, actually, good at what it does, at what I do. So you guys have a contract with the state of Florida. We're going to talk about that, what you all are doing for Florida, and just a little bit in more general terms about what is going on in the world of KPMG and in business. What is going on in the world of artificial intelligence and how that is being integrated into business, the public sector, the private sector, and Major League Sports even, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Sure. All right, so let's start with, let's just start with the very basic. We do have very sophisticated listeners, but let's just start out with, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, sometimes she helps me come up with the questions for my guests, and she said, well, what is AI really? So let's just maybe a high-level explanation of what it is.
So AI is interesting. It's a combination of using tools and technology to sort of, what I would say, make efficiencies better. It does things like predictions. It does things like automation. It does a lot of, like, what I would say, remove a lot of repetitiveness in the marketplace. We've gone from, AI's been around for a while. I want to make sure that's clear to our listeners. It's been around for a while from our traditional AI, which is what we used to do back in the day with predicting things and converting things into things that we can process. But then Now, you just brought up about the OpenAI ChatGPT capability. It is now the ability to generate content. Things like audio, images, videos. We're seeing that transformation happen over the last 1 year, 1.5 years. And that's the progression. We're obviously
That's what everybody's freaked out about.
That's what everybody, and we're not in that, I think, what we've been hearing is we're not in that Terminator phase yet, where we've got robots and things of that nature. But I think it's more about, hey, we're just taking another step further to what we've previously been doing.
So don't be scared yet.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It's no different. I was telling my kids, it's no different than walking down the street. What's the first thing you do when you walk down the street? You look left, you look right. And so similarly with AI, you just need a level of what I would say governance and rules and guidance on how to use it. And we're in that state now.
So we're developing that. I think, I don't know if we want to get into this, but has government really caught up with that yet? Or are we just kind of on the fringe of, we hear a lot about them trying to regulate social media platforms, other kinds of large, not just the platforms, mostly social media. But I was just thinking the legislature passed a bill that would limit the use of AI in political campaigns. So how far is the regulation coming along? Is it catching up, or does it need to?
I would say the key thing to know, what's really accelerated AI over the past year and a half, is that it's become transformative. And the way in which it's done that is you've switched from 50 years of programming computers to do exactly what you want them to do, and now you're training computers, and it feels like a black box. And so we're at sort of the peak of the hype and fear cycle, where AI is advanced because it's able to learn on its own, learn on specific data sets that you feed it and so forth. So
because it's getting smart, right? It's like computers they're outsmarting us. It's like I don't know if you guys are too young, you probably never saw it, but the movie 2001 with, with Hal, that's the famous, the infamous kind of example of the computer outsmarting the humans.
No, that's exactly right. So I think because of the fact that it's no longer doing exactly what we want it to do, we're actually targeting it towards specific areas and letting it learn on its own. It's advancing really fast, but it's also creating, I think, a lot of policy issues and questions and ethical quandaries because we don't quite understand what it's doing in the black box.
I feel like I want to know if I saw something about Sports Illustrated was using these articles that were generated by AI, and they had actually AI generated pictures of the authors, right? So I just feel like I want to know if something is being generated by the computer or by a human. Does that make me like old and old-fashioned, or?
No, I don't think so. I think just like any other work product or any output that comes out of anything, we always want to know the level of authenticity that's coming from. We want to know who created it. Was it doctorate? Is it real? And it's just curiosity from a human perspective, right? We want to know if what we're seeing on the screen is fake or not. And I think this holds true for anything that we do, whether it's literature, images, graphics to some sort. I think there's nothing wrong with trying to understand more of that.
I think that Sports Illustrated example is egregious too.
It really is. It really is. I just saw a story. I just saw the headline this morning. The Sun Sentinel is one of a number of newspapers or new media outlets that is joined in the suit against Microsoft for what they're doing. So I'm assuming it's because they're using their content and then without compensating them. So I don't want to range.
But you can spin it in a different way too. I've been seeing ads. I haven't tried it yet, but I've been seeing ads on my social media about apps that you can put a regular photo of yourself and it sort of transforms it into a professional looking photo.
Oh, that's what I need.
So if you don't have the time or the money to go get a professional headshot in some
Glamour
cases.
shots.
So those glamour shots are now being, you can put your regular photo of you going out somewhere, and then you put it into this app, and it now creates professional looking headshots, which I thought looked really
What's
remarkable.
that going to do to the dating apps?
That's
I mean,
right.
oh my gosh, what does that say about truth in advertising? I don't know. Well, you guys are working in Florida, and you've got a couple of things that we wanted to talk about. We talked about in a little, we had a little icebreaker a couple weeks ago. So tell us what you're doing in Florida I think you're working on with the Department of Management Services and the Department of Emergency Management.
Yeah, so with just like working with agencies in Florida, as well as I would say state hospitals or higher education, we do a lot of things around AI. It starts with, especially in one of the agencies, it's around taking a lot of their documentation that they've collected to date from either within or from the entities that they work with, and converting that into what I would say into a structured form. And what that means is I'm now able to take a piece of paper, convert it into something that's a computer human readable format, and now I'm able to apply rules to it. And those rules are validating for payment, for example, or potentially looking at fraud, waste, and abuse rules. And the fact that you can now go through and look through 400,000 pages of documents in probably less than 10 minutes and apply a boatload of rules against it, you've sort of built out a level of efficiencies with the workforce at these agencies. And that's, I think, how we've helped them to sort of what I would say is transform their day-to-day activities. And instead of working on like these mundane activities, this is now what I would say is you're waking up and you've got the machine that's supposed to be built for that purpose running against these set of rules and creating flags that you can now focus your productive time resolving.
So who creates the rule? I mean, who tells it what the rules are? Does a human do that, or does
Correct.
it identify?
That's correct. So we're never going to eliminate the need for a human in this process. The humans are working with state agencies or subject matters, both internal and external to the clients, and we work together. We as humans have to develop those rules, because if we let the machine dictate and decide what the rules are, we're probably going to get certain level of unbiasedness in the results. We're going to have to do a lot of rework. There's going to be some level of concern about the output. So a human is always going to be in the loop. It's just doing some of the things that are what I would still say is boring and monotonous. It's getting to a level of efficiency.
So can you give us an example of what the rule
Sure.
might be,
Yeah.
or what that kind?
So if I was a reviewer at the state and I had to look through a number of applications that are coming, that are being submitted to me for some kind of let's say a grant or some federal program. The fact that every one of these applications have to submit, say, a driver's license, right, as evidence for my payment. And I, as a human being, am able to see one driver's license, maybe a second, maybe a third, but I'm not going to know the 5th or the 20th or the 21st driver's license and if they doctorate that license compared to the first one that I ever saw in my review. Mm-hmm. So how as I as a human being going to know if someone sent me a fake Nick Nolte driver's license versus my own driver's license when they're reviewing an application? They're going to take it for face value. Everything checks the box. But the machine can say, well, this document looks fake. Someone edited. Someone had an instance in a different state where the eye color wasn't even a registered eye color on the driver's license.
Really?
But they edited it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and they would have never caught it. And so I think what we're starting to see is let the machines do what the machines do really well, which is identify and spot these things, but you still have the human in the loop to say, I'm going to review it one further down the loop as in terms of validating what's coming out of it.
So that's the high level, what you all are doing. Do you have any specific examples of what you're doing at DEM or DMS?
Yep. So at DEM, we look at documents for, in terms of the emergency management documents. We review them. We apply business rules against it. So for example, one of the things is the same truck driver who's giving me, who's supplying my documents in the same location in the same place at the same time. A reviewer is never going to know that. But when I ask for reimbursement for payment, they're going to notice that the machine's going to notice that Bobby, who's working one site in Tallahassee and another site and in Miami, is clearing debris at the same time. I'm going to know that
So
super
fraud,
quick.
identifying
100%.
fraud.
100% the machine's able to detect fraud in that case.
Right.
And it just, look, the goal of the machine isn't to 100% say Bobby's fraudulent nature. It could be an honest mistake. It just so happens that Bobby's signature was on it, but it was someone else's. And it could just be a fat fingering in the process. So our goal is still to say...
A what?
It could be a fat fingering process.
What's that?
It's just if someone keyed it
Oh,
incorrectly.
okay. All right. Human error. Right.
Yeah, human error happens.
Yeah.
And so the goal is really just to flag it, have someone review it and say, well, this is okay. Or this is an honest mistake, and we'll talk to why this happened, and we'll get it resolved.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I know there's like a lot of that with the debris. There's been
Correct.
quite a lot of some scandals in some areas
Yes.
about the debris removal too. So, have you like completed any of that work? Has there been
it's
any
ongoing
identification?
because as disasters continue to happen in the state on a yearly
Yeah.
basis, and
No kidding.
one that we're expecting a heavy set of disasters this year,
Right.
we're going to continue
Fingers
to see
crossed,
fraud, waste, and abuse opportunities. But also, I want to make sure we realize that it's also helping to validate things that are 100% clean from a submission process. It's good. We're using the machine to apply rules to validate whether or not we're ready for payment. And so the machine
So
does
we
do
know
its
that
job.
our tax dollars are being spent wisely,
Yes.
or they're not being abused, or
Correct.
whatever.
Correct.
And then that probably would help the state in terms of getting their reimbursements from the federal government
Correct.
too, right?
Correct.
Which would trickle down, I guess, to
Back to the
vendors.
entities that are
vendors.
that are asking for payment.
right.
That is
And I guess that might be the local, the counties.
It could be anyone. It could be
Yeah.
state, local, vendors out there who support the entities themselves.
Right.
Everybody, anybody's that is in the heat of the moment from a disaster perspective.
What about DMS?
Well, one of the things that cutting through the hype, and I know we were joking about the revolutionary nature of AI, but at the end of the day, it's just a tool. And I think one of the best ways that the tool gets used is...
Don't set your hair on fire, Dara.
Don't. Not yet. It's not. It's at this stage. It's more.
I'll tell
of an
you what.
assistant.
I'll tell you why. Because I've been fooling around with it a little bit, and then we'll hear about DMS. It was so fast. Like, I barely had hit the enter key, and it was a very simple pitch that I asked for, something else that I write a lot about and talk a lot about, marijuana, legalization of marijuana, or rescheduling of marijuana, the effect of that, something, I guess, in the works. And it came back and it didn't even pause. It just started and it's writing away, and I just thought, thank goodness for the podcast, because it's maybe, I'm going to be AI'd out of a job here pretty soon. That's what I think a lot of people are afraid of.
People talk about the uncanny valley. There's sort of when you start to simulate people too good, it gets a little creepy, and I think that's kind of the stage that we're at. Is a lot of people recognize when they try it the first time at home, or download one of the models, it feels a little too human-like, and so it freaks people out a little bit. I think that's once you get past that, though, you realize it's just a tool. It's good at certain things. It's not good at others. And I think one of the most telling studies, everyone's sort of trying to find out, okay, what is it good at? What should we be using it for in government, for example? There was a Harvard Business School study that showed that 40%, that people were 40% more productive in completing certain tasks with AI. And then other tasks that AI is not particularly good at, they were actually 19% less productive. So if you use it for...
Do you know what those were? Can you tell us what those were?
Yeah, there's specific things that AI is really good at. So pulling structured data out of unstructured documents. I think Bobby gave a good example. We have another one. We've been working with a large healthcare system in Florida, and they have hospitals all over the state, and they have different policies at each of the hospitals, policies and procedures, and collection of documents. They've they've grown through acquisition over time, and they wanted to get a handle on what are all of the policies and procedures. How do we start to standardize them across the hospitals, across the healthcare system? And so they went out and collected all of this data, and it was in SharePoint, it was in Microsoft Word, it was in PDFs, and then they used AI, the latest AI capability, to say, summarize these documents, organize them, classify them, and then show us where there's discrepancies so that we can have a path forward to standardization. And so that's a really good use, because no one wants to sit down and read 10,000 documents.
I mean, even if you do, it would take you forever to, as a human, or even a set of humans, a set of humans. It's very catching.
Every time Bobby says human beings, I laugh.
But even, it would take you forever to organize that in some efficient way.
Well, and it's why no one has done it, right? You save this, and we're just awash in data and documents. And so I think one of the best uses of AI is going in and organizing it, pulling out the data, structuring it, classifying it, making it more easy to read. And we're actually finding that you can start to train then specific custom AI models on those documents, and then it can start to be an assistant to you. So it's good as a research assistant. It's good as giving you a first draft of things.
Right.
Where it's not good, we've seen a lot of...
I was just going to ask you. You could see it. I was on the edge of my seat.
It's not... we're seeing a lot of examples in the media around hallucinations, right? So where it makes things up because it doesn't quite know the answer for whatever reason. It's giving out false information. And clearly accuracy over the past year has improved dramatically. Every time they release a new model, accuracy improves. So it's a problem they've been focused on. But you wouldn't want to unleash it without any human in the loop, as Bobby mentioned, right?
Right.
You want it to do that first draft, not the final draft.
Yeah, that's what I've heard from people who are using it regularly to do things like press releases and things like that.
Right.
It does do a good first draft, and then you need to have somebody like a human being come in and make sure that it sounds like something that a human being would say.
Yeah, I mean,
and that it's accurate too.
We've seen instances of report generation. We've done it in other state agencies where, even for ourselves, we're looking at it we're sort of testing a lot of these things for ourselves first, like that concept of, before I go tell a client, hey, this is what you need to do, we're going to try it out on ourselves.
Right.
So even with some of the work that our teams does, our risk services, where they go out and they interview locations, they interview folks as part of their day-to-day jobs, they're having to write a lot of these on Word documents or handwritten notes, and they got to come back and try to summarize it so they have the key salient points that they're trying to make. And we've been starting to see value in what the OpenAI capability is to summarize just their meeting notes and their conversation so that it sort of highlights.
Yeah.
Is it possible to get it wrong? Sure.
I mean, I'm in meetings all the time.
Yep.
This is like interrupting is part of my culture, so I apologize,
please.
but I don't really, because we're having a conversation, and that's what makes this fun. Is that I'm in these meetings all the time with my corporate, I won't call them corporate overlords, but the company that I work for. And I'm constantly seeing these AI note takers. They're there, and people have them. And we were in a big meeting, town hall, not too long ago, and one of the CEO was like, "Hey, turn that off, right?" So hopefully you're aware of it, but you might not be. They're constantly. I use Otter as a transcription service, and they have an assistant now that's taking notes, and so it's very. I don't want to say it's pervasive. I don't want to say it's sneaky, but it is. It's being used a lot of times, I think, when people are not aware of it now.
Yeah, you really want to be transparent about that. I think the language capabilities are amazing. So the ability to translate into other languages, all of those things, I think, are going to improve, access to government services. But I think the key is, you got to be transparent about it.
Yeah, in the both private and the public sector, for sure.
It's helping individuals. I mean, I'll be honest, for myself, I still struggle writing really good English sentences.
Really?
Yeah, to this day. So I will get my wife, for example, to review some of my really important documents or emails just to make sure it's comfortable. But even in that case, what I've seen with the tool is it's helping me craft the tone of my language. I'm able to say, hey, can you write it in a professional manner? Or can you write it in a laid-back manner?
True. Yeah.
Or can you write it in a casual manner? Just so that I can see the different variations of the craft of the English language in terms of how I communicate out to others. And we're seeing a lot of value in how that is catering to different, what I would say, populations around the state in terms of what that would mean, in terms of how one would perceive the language.
And so do you have the whatever assistant you use, do you, have you told it, like, do you interact with it enough so that it knows your voice, so that it can reflect how you, because like I have a certain writing style, and people who read my stories will know I use a lot of, I have a voice, and so I haven't used it enough to be able to replicate my voice. But does yours
So we've, at KPMG, I was going back to like how we've tried to take our own concepts, and before we go tell a client, here's what you need to do. We've built our own, we call it advisory GPT, but it's our own version of a chat GPT, which is just for us as KPMG, for us to do our work. And I've sort of created a level of prompts with it so that I can sort of have it understand what I need from it for myself. And it sort of is able to cater to my own needs. But again, I am reviewing it. I am telling it what it needs to do, so that human in the loop aspect of it will never go away.
So you're training it,
but I'm training it exactly to how I would like for it to feed my output back to me.
Do you do that too?
Yeah, I've found that using it as a personal assistant is probably the best use, and everyone's using it for note taking, right? 'Cause it's the ability to translate speech to text, to call out the action items in a meeting. All of those things are really helpful. I was recently at the doctor's, and my doctor is, 70-year-old man. He had the ability to translate his, transcription essentially service, but it went further and it actually plugged it into the electronic health record system.
Oh.
So right after the meeting, or right after the appointment, I've got the notes.
Wow.
Into my
That's
app,
so helpful.
which
As
is
somebody
amazing.
with a chronic illness, I can tell you that is really a helpful thing, and especially for people who have complicated diagnoses and things like that. A lot of times when you go to the doctors, you're intimidated, you're not well, they're telling you stuff. I have been for years asking, and my doctors all love me. My doctor, when I fractured my tibia, I was telling you about that last year, she called me and said, my endocrinologist said, how did you fracture your tibia? And I said, oh, did they send you the notes from the hospital? And she said, no, I heard about it on your podcast. So she trusts me. We have a good relationship. But I, for years, have been asking if I can record when they're talking to you. They don't like it. They're not comfortable with you recording. I mean, for obvious reasons. But it would be so helpful, because when you're sick and they're telling you things you don't remember, God help you if you try to call them back and get somebody to tell you what they told you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So that's a good use. We have a new email address, and we'd love to hear from you. To reach us and give us your input, tell us what you'd like to hear. Tell us what you thought about what you already heard. Tell us how fabulous we are. Join the Deeper Divas team. Send an email to podcasts@e.newsserviceflorida.com. That's podcasts@e.newsserviceflorida.com. And I promise I will read everyone. So let's go back to pivot back to DMS. What are you doing over there?
Similar, I think, to a lot of agencies across the U.S. I think people are looking to, comb through all of the unstructured data and start to pull out key elements.
Unstructured data is something that we're hearing a lot of.
the place to look for use cases is where you have a lot of unstructured data. And one of the things I think that many agencies
That's like forms and applications and payments
all the
and
paper that's
paperwork,
now sort of
bureaucracy.
It's electronic, but not really. It's,
right.
Screenshots and captures. And
stuff. Okay, sorry, keep interrupting.
No, that's fine. So I think what we're seeing generally across many agencies is that's a great place to look for use cases. I think the flip side to that is, as Bobby and I were talking about, is the workforce productivity tools. So within KPMG, Bobby mentioned we've brought the capabilities of AI in-house, so it's safe and we're not, there's no data going in or out. It's all in-house. It's very secure. And when you're able to do that and create an assistant, it enables you to, as a worker trying to get your job done, to do things easier. And the next sort of level of that is we're seeing that capability built into products. So if you think of, we're hearing a lot about Microsoft Copilot, for example, where essentially these AI models are now being merged with the products that Silicon Valley is putting out for specific uses. And so we're seeing more and more of that across government agencies, people looking to pilot, co-pilot, start to turn it on. And I think the two ways to think about AI are, sort of custom purpose-built solutions that you can use in concert for specific tasks, and then more generally as just making your job more efficient. And what's fascinating about that is there's a rush to do it, because if your coworker is using AI, they're getting more efficient. Suddenly they have a competitive edge, and so you feel the need to start to adopt it. So this is
your coworker or your competitor
or your competition, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you're seeing, I think, an arms race in AI and a race to adopt, is because it's leveling up those who are using it effectively.
But we're redefining jobs to some extent as well. And
that's what I was going to ask.
What I mean by that is
like
for example, let's just talk about it at the call center. If I work at the call centers for a number of these agencies and I have to field or man the phones from most of the citizens that are calling it, for example, they're going to say, hey, I need X, I need Y. Can you tell me where on the website I need to find certain policies or certain regulations? What we've seen with this new form of AI is that it's actually alleviating some of that, what I would say, burden on the call center agent. And it's giving like an intelligent bot-like capability where I, as a citizen, am now able to ask questions in a rudimentary English manner that can now be understood by a machine that's giving me information that I need. Because back in the day, I would either get hit one for
like
something
Walgreens.
else. Yeah,
oh God!
hit
and you
number
want to pull your
2,
hair out.
and I guarantee you, everyone who calls in, the first thing we do is either hit star, 0, or pound to try to see if we can speak to a human being.
I do it all the time. That is not a.
It's not.
Yeah,
but
I forget what they say.
Imagine calling in now, and you're now able to say, "What? Can you help me find what meals are reimbursable for my program?" And the agent the human agent, as I would call it, the intelligent agent, would say, absolutely, on page 55, this is where you would find options for what meals would look like for reimbursement, etc. Those are things that are now redefining, because now what you're doing is the call center agents are now hopefully just focusing on calls that are truly, what I would say, for citizens that are struggling to really find something that they need. Are you still going to have a certain of the population still call in? Absolutely. Like my dad will still call in, regardless of whether or not he can find it, whether or not he's confirmed it on the website, he will absolutely call it in. But my mom, she'll probably use the app and use the intelligent bot to get what she needs. So we are seeing a trend of adoption and acceptance of using mobile capabilities and technology to just redefine how the workforce is working on. And that's what we've seen in other agencies as well, about how that's helping them.
I mean, but then, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, it does raise, as I mentioned, my not real serious concerns about being, AI'd out of a job, but when you talk about creating efficiencies, that does translate into we don't need as many humans to do this because we now have a more efficient way of doing it with fewer workers. So what does that mean for workforce, like the state workforce, the county workforce, for KPMG's workforce?
Jobs will definitely change. I mean, that's happening now, right? We're starting to see the earliest studies where the nature of the work is changing, and it's, certain things are getting easier, certain things are getting more efficient, and we're going to see that continue. I think for government, it's probably it's probably one of the big upsides, because a lot of government workers are overburdened. They've got too much work on their plate. There are tons of vacancies at certain agencies. And so I think you have an opportunity to, make life easier for people, save time working on tedious tasks and that sort of thing. So I think the nature of the work is going to shift. It always does with any technology, especially when this impactful. But it's, hopefully it's going to be a benefit. And I love the customer service example, because it's one area where really early on people unleashed chatbots and like early AI. And every year our customer experience survey gets worse. People are more frustrated, and if you've had to call, right? It's you either get press 1 to go to this area,
which I hate,
or you get a person,
and they don't have zero, like you said, and why not? Because
and even if you get someone,
they hang up on you.
Two other people. Yeah. So the AI in that area, I think, is potentially game changing, because it will be able to respond in a way that's very human-like.
Can we get the Australian accent in that then? Because that's what I really like.
We were talking about Dr. Dre. You can ask how
I'm wearing my Beats. That's why we were talking about Dre. Yeah.
But what we've seen is that 23% we've seen studies where 23% of jobs will change. And what we mean by change is not elimination. It's more about upskilling them as well. Because they're just some it's true, which is some employee workforces may not have had enough of a financial capability to go to college or go to some of these higher educational institutions. What we've seen with some of these skills is you can learn, and it's easy entry to learn some of these newer skills that are being developed using AI. And so that will change how our workforces will be more productive, in our opinion.
So Stanford and MIT did a study recently where they looked at customer service agents in particular, equipped them with the latest AI models, and they found that they were able to resolve issues 14 to 34% faster.
Which means less time waiting on the phone for your 15th in line, and the wait time is 35 minutes, and leave your number and we'll call you back, which I never do because I'm always afraid they're not going to call me back. I don't know why. I'm like, whatever. But I think it's a movement. You talked about higher education. I'd like to know what's going on in higher education, because I was talking to a college president not that long ago, and I think it was Northwest Florida College that is starting an AI program there. And this is my advice to kids whenever I talk to groups of high schoolers or young people. Go into whatever AI training you can get. I think is really going to be, obviously I'm not a genius to recommend that, but it is something that we're going to see a lot more of that in our offered to students, right?
Oh yeah, my son's in college, and
and
a year ago I think the focus was plagiarism, right? People misuse of AI.
Right.
And then they quickly figured out that AI could actually identify plagiarists. So, there's like this ongoing concern. But I think we're
it's the terrible, wonderful, really.
Yeah, exactly. But they've moved past that, and they've just established an AI center at his school. I think, we're seeing incredible things happening at University of Florida, Florida State, across the Florida system. And to me, it gets to a really important subject, which is AI as infrastructure. I read just in the first 3 months of this year, 3 companies, Microsoft, Meta, and Google, spent $32 billion to develop AI infrastructure.
And in the first quarter, is that what you
Just
said?
in the first quarter of this year.
Wow.
Which is an obscene amount of money.
Wow.
But it shows you.
I mean, they
more-
make an obscene amount of money, so I guess they have, it's discretionary for them. It's like our lunch money, but
True.
but that is a huge investment.
Huge investment.
Did that go to pay for those Google glasses too? I mean, because that was
I'm
a
sure
big
it did.
fail. That
Yeah.
was a huge fail, I gotta say. But
So I think with that infrastructure investment comes jobs and obviously opportunities for kids who are in college to get involved in AI. So I think it's really smart that University of Florida and other universities are leaning into that hard.
and what other uses are we seeing? And what else are either you guys working on, or what's hot? I saw something about sports, professional sports, or I don't know. Professional sports is probably not the right word, but
So we've seen how we've helped in the private sector a lot has been around. There's a couple of things. One is, for example, in sports, we've seen the old movie Moneyball, where the Oakland baseball team was using AI or data analytics to be smarter in how they recruited players. Well, how we've been helping, obviously, is not in that category, but more about helping with scheduling. Can you imagine in a basketball game or a basketball league or other leagues out there, there is arenas that need to be booked. There are players' travels. There are hotels that need to be booked. All of that put together is a form of how we would be helping them come up with scheduling with all these parameters and combinations of issues and concerns and constraints and restrictions, but still coming up with a schedule that works. So we've built sort of an intelligent platform that allows you to put on all these variables, all of these data points from all across systems, and be able to come up with insights and schedules and plans and et cetera, et cetera.
well, that would be something that would be useful, like for for national party campaigns and things like that too. For the conventions.
Yep.
For example, because if you've ever attended a convention, they're a scheduling nightmare, and so I was thinking that might be a good use for that.
It's really hard to wrap your mind around the math involved when you get that many parameters.
Yeah.
I mean, the March Madness is a great example. No one's ever
That's
had a perfect
basketball, she
pool.
says to herself. I know that. Yes.
And it's almost a mathematic impossibility to have a perfect, perfectly predict March Madness, and it's just the number of factors. Just when you start to multiply them, it gets too high. So that's a great use for AI.
Yeah, and people are, I guess, using this. I write a lot about sports betting and things like that. I'm sure there's more and more of people relying on this.
I'm sure they're very early adopters in sports betting.
Yeah, for sure.
Even in the private sector, we've seen instances, or public sectors, but other governments outside, like windmills. We saw an example of a company using drone capabilities to send them up to the height of the wings of the windmills so that they can detect if there's any issues. So instead of setting human beings or individuals up into those really high heights to inspect every wing and every part of a mechanical component that makes up a windmill, they're using drones in the concept of like imagery to automatically detect and recognize if there are issues with that, so that to reduce potential safety and other measures in there. So people are being really creative with using concepts like drones and combination with AI, and being able to step up, or what I would say, improve workforce productivity, improve worker safety, et cetera, even in warehouses. So I think it is actually game changing in terms of how our markets are actually adopting and embracing AI, but also at the same time acknowledging that there's a level of governance that needs to still be in play.
What do you think we're going to be seeing in the future? Like, where are we headed? What's next? And then next? Like, is it HAL? Is that where we're going?
No. What I think is really interesting, I think that potential future for AI, and obviously every day we're surprised by something new. I mean, a year ago, it wasn't creating video or generating image to the level it is today. Now you've got Sora, which is you can type in a prompt and it'll create video. So there's shocking capabilities, but I think to me what's
I saw the Mona Lisa singing a song the other day. That's probably viral times a gazillion, but it's so entertaining. And we subscribe to Getty for pictures, for images. And they gave us a training on their AI capabilities, and they were asking for suggestions, and I gave them something. They're like, no, that's too simple. You need to make it more complicated. So it's amazing what
That's
can be done.
interesting, the Getty example too, because that's their business.
Yes.
But they're embracing it because they have to.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So any predictions, obviously, a year from now will be laughable. But
Right.
what I think
It's
is
happening so rapidly.
so fast.
Yeah.
And especially when it's $30 billion in 3 months.
That's
more capability is coming.
Yeah.
But I do think, like, stepping back, we've spent decades trying to learn how to program computers, and then it was how to use software, like where are the menus, where are the buttons, how do I make this thing do what I want it to do. And I think what's potentially very interesting about generative AI is now the computer's trying to figure out how to talk to us. So it's the first time, I think, where we don't have to give it a specific set of instructions. We don't have to have all this institutional knowledge around how to use Excel or Power BI or whatever. It's starting to make it easier to take advantage of all the technology that's available. So average person, average worker has access now to incredibly powerful tools and technologies that they might not have a year ago. And so I think where I see the future is I think ultimately it becomes the interface for us to engage with technology. So instead of having all of this slew of programs and computers and data centers and all of this, it's shifted to the cloud with a very simple interface, which is generative AI.
Right. So you're just telling it so it knows everything that we know, and then we won't have to do all the things that we've taught it to do.
It'll be the tool of tools. It'll figure out how to use all the other things for you. So
that'll be good because I hate Excel nowadays. It's just
yes, exactly. That's a great example.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else that you'd like to share with us
any
today?
Predictions you want to make?
Oh, good. Bobby, I think Bobby's got something a little more daring, right?
I don't know, but I think what we're seeing from the federal mandates, as well as what's being pushed down with the bills being passed at the state level, there is going to always be an emphasis on governance, on what we can do in the future. And I think as we're embracing more and more about this AI capability, or at least this next phase of AI capability, we're going to be in really, I would say, in really cool environments in terms of what we're going to be doing, whether it's improving citizen engagement, whether it's going to be workforce productivity, whether it's just new age concepts that are being built out that are going to be embraced more and more. We're going to really see a shift in how things are done. Like the example of Sora. We're talking about how do we creating videos just from writing a few sentences. How awesome would it be to now go to school and because I think it would have worked with me when I was a kid, but you can now learn concepts if someone is showing it to me on a video. If I type in and say, teach me basic algebra and show me, give it to me in a video format, I will learn it so much better than I would on a piece of paper or on a book. In that kind. So it's game changing the things that we used to do. And as long as we put the level of governance behind it, I think we're going to see a lot of different methods of learning and adopting these concepts.
That's I hadn't even really thought about it. There's so many things to think about in every aspect of life and business and social sciences. But, making I'm struggling for the word. I haven't had a kid in school for a gazillion years. Personalized education that seems like the ideal thing, because teachers are busy. They have a lot of kids in their classes, and helping making unique sets of developing a unique education plan, not just a plan, but instruction for kids to meet their personal needs would have been something that you would need a teacher for every student to do that. It would be outrageously expensive.
Well,
and now you could do it for free.
And everyone
Instantly.
has access to that tutor.
Instantly.
Right? You don't have to pay $100 an hour
Right.
to hire a professional tutor.
Yeah.
You have your own right there.
Yeah. Well, this has been really fun. I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and I'd like to talk to you again in a year or
Check
sooner,
our predictions.
Sooner, see what's going on in the world of AI. Bobby Gorantla and Arthur Higbee here in KPMG headquarters in Tallahassee. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Dara.
Thank you for having us.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.